Hello again. We at Access Television have gathered to bring you news and views from people and places within our community. This episode, we will focus on health, healing, and housing, and how our friends and community are collaborating to solve some problems. I'm Molly Caron.
And I'm Imtiaz Popat. And on this show, I will be talking to Naveen Gurn about exhibition he's curated at Center A as part of the Indian Summer Festival called Gunargie being brown in Chinatown.
Excellent. As well, we'll speak with Z. Kessler as Narges Moali will discuss the tiny house community vision that Z. Kessler has.
And Sherry Duggal is back doing her new segment on health and healing, and I'll be talking to her about that.
I'm very excited to speak with Jean Swanson, who is an advocate and activist. She's been at the municipal level paying attention to our leaders as they try and solve the homeless problem in Vancouver.
And Wendy Peterson will be talking to Kevin and Mohammed, updating us on the situation on the SROs in the downtown east side.
All of that, and we begin with our elder and returning Chief Bill Wilson in conversation with Gunargie O Sullivan as they explain the process of adding land to reserves. Here they are.
Welcome to Access Television. I'm Gunargie O Sullivan with Hereditary Chief Hemas, Bill Wilson. Thank you for joining me today.
My pleasure.
Yeah, it's awesome to have you on the team, by the way.
Thank you very much.
Did you know that the Tlowisis people have purchased land in sale, have purchased land?
Just as I heard from you, and I heard it on the news on Friday, yeah.
You heard it on the news, really?
Yeah, well, there's not much gets by me. I mean, even though I'm old and tired, I mean, not much, yeah, I heard about it.
Well, they have a Facebook page. They've been in negotiation, have dropped the negotiating process and decided to purchase land off of the reserve in Comox Valley.
Well, it's not really in Comox Valley, it's Willow Point. It's about from Comox, halfway between Comox and Campbell River. It's a beautiful area. It's right near where the Sliammon people did exactly the same thing some 30 years ago.
So what is the deal with purchasing land?
Well, I mean, that's a contradiction that I can't explain either, but the reality is that these people want to live somewhere, and they won't go back to their own home community. Like Turner Island is a fabulously beautiful place, Mamavilkila and other places like that.
It's an island all to
in our
itself.
Territory, but they're not desirous of living in that kind of quote isolation unquote. I think if it's good for them, that's fine. I'm not a member of that band, so I don't know, but I mean, my attitude is that either we go back to our own land and territory and populate it and live there, or we just become white people and surrender. And I think that's wrong because I'm related to a lot of the people from there.
Well, I think the process of consultation with the people is wrong. From the get-go, they give you a piece of paper and a yes and no answer. That isn't consultation, or at least meaningful consultation. And sometimes it gets read wrong, and suddenly without even realizing it, the community has given up their rights.
Well, you've got to remember something that most Indian politicians, and I used to be one of them, today consider consultation flying over an Indian reserve on your way to Ottawa at 35,000 feet.
Yeah.
I mean, we've talked to the Indians.
Faster than the speed of light.
Yeah, and the problem is that that's expressed by the non-Indian governments, like the Department of Indian Affairs and the other agents, as the Honeyquatine case, which requires consultation and consent, not just consultation, consent, is now disappearing into simply a whole series of conferences. And this kind of purchase of land, can you imagine? If I knocked you out, stole your wallet, and then when you found out about it, I gave you half of the amount of money that you had in your wallet, kept the other half for myself, would that be fair? Well,
No.
of course it wouldn't be. And it seems to me that why are we negotiating our ownership of the land to surrender our claim to it for one minuscule amount of the land? It doesn't make any legal sense to me, and it certainly doesn't make any moral sense to me. The reality is that the true consultation with the Aboriginal people means they have to be informed. They have to know what's going on. This is Manhattan Island. This is $28 worth of beads and trinkets all over again.
And right now we're just getting money to purchase the land, or purchasing the land, no housing as far as I know, and no money.
There are infrastructure considerations built
Okay.
into it, but I mean, the reality is, like, why would you have to buy land back?
That's yours.
From a non-Indian person who stole the land from you in the first place, and then receive that as some kind of a gift. I mean, that does not make any sense to me. I mean, I do know the leadership of the Tlowisis people, and I think they do a fairly reasonable job. But the reality is that had they had decent negotiation, I mean, they could have reclaimed and put infrastructure back into Turner Island, which is a paradise. I mean, it used to be a big, thriving village as recently in my lifetime, 50 years ago.
And that's amazing. And now it's totally been basically evacuated.
Nobody's lived there for 40 years.
Yeah, the people left the territory because
for many
they
reasons,
were,
medical reasons, school reasons, various other reasons, as well as the loss of the fishing industry. You know, at one time, there were 15 canneries in our territory. And, you know, so there was a cannery, and the village worked in the cannery. The people lived there, everybody had money, and, you know, and there was salmon. Doesn't happen anymore.
My personal opinion is that the people are not really being encouraged to go back to the land because they want to turn it into another like tourist trap, and we as First Nations people or Tlowisis people are not going to benefit from the land itself. That's why they need us to relocate somewhere else. That's just my opinion. But the other thing you had mentioned...
I don't think it's that sinister, but I mean, I do agree.
Really?
I mean, there's very little reason for anybody who lives in the city, lives in Vancouver or Campbell River or other places like that, to go to Turner Island, because it's just like my village, my mother's village at Guayastum's, Guilford Island. There are no jobs there.
Okay.
So what's the point of people going there? Well, the point of people going there, as far as I'm concerned, is that, you know, this is where our roots are. This is our homeland. You know, like Vancouver. I live in Vancouver, just as you live in Vancouver, but I'm not from here.
Yeah.
I don't have any ancestral relationship to this territory because it belongs to the Musqueams and the Squamish people and the people in North Vancouver. But to keep the villages alive where our people worked for, remember, thousands of years, not 10 years, not 50 years, thousands of years, they can trace our people back to the Broughton Archipelago, which is where Turner Island is and Guilford is. And that's where we should be. I ran for chief, as you know, and I lost by a couple of votes. And I was ready to move home. I'm not tired of Vancouver. I love Vancouver.
I do too. I've been contemplating moving back to Turner Island myself,
Yeah.
you know, for years now, since I knew that it was up for negotiation.
But it's not for you and I. You say you're about to be 50. Well, I'm 71.
Yeah.
I'd probably be useless in a place like that. But the reality is that young people, you know, with a future in those communities built on the basis of ecological pursuits and the fishery and the spotted prawns, you know, the huge, you know, where the spotted prawns come from, they come from our territory. And those things sell for like $28 a pound down here. Well, when I was in the village for 2 weeks, I counted 42 prawn boats go by me with at least $100,000 worth of prawns on them. Guess how many dollars the reserve got for that? None. None.
See?
Well, there's an economic base right there. I mean, our people should be receiving at least 50% of every dollar that's extracted from our territory. That just makes sense to me. But there's also ecological tourism, kayaking, and doing various other things there. That people come through that village, 1,000 people come through that village or go by that village in kayaks every year.
Yeah.
And you know what they ask people? Who do we pay for the privilege of being here? These are people that don't have to, they're not even being charged, and there's no stops, there's nothing in the village that could allow them to come. I mean, it's a huge untapped resource that really wouldn't harm the environment. It's sustainable, it's renewable, it's green.
It's
Yeah.
important, you know, and I wish we had more time to talk about this. The one thing I dislike about the whole process is every time we go into negotiations, the community hears that you may not benefit from this in your generation, but the next will. When will the next generation benefit, really and truly? This has been Access
You know
TV.
when it will be?
When?
When you stop paying checks to lawyers. Unless progress is taking place and money's put in the pockets of the people.
There you go. There's your answer. Thank you for joining us on Access TV.
Hi, this is Imtiaz Popat, and with me is Sherry Duggal. She is a naturopath and an artist, and she was with us here on Access TV last month talking about her new book, Beneath the Surface.
Yep.
And she's back to start her new segment on health and healing. Welcome back, Sherry.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited about this opportunity.
Yes.
Looking forward to it, yeah.
So you're a naturopath
Yes,
and
I
an
am.
artist.
Yes.
So what are you going to focus on this new segment that you're starting?
I actually want to focus on the link between the two, linking creativity and healing and how they're interconnected. Now, medicine has three aspects to it. There's the body, mind, and spirit. Everyone knows about the body component, which is the physical aspect. Headache, aspirin. Tummy ache, you take other medications. But I want my show to be different in terms of I want to focus on the psychological and spiritual aspect of healing, what that's about, along with other issues that occur in the Lower Mainland in general.
Yeah, especially in an environment. And I
Yes.
guess what's on the top of people's mind is air quality with this fire smoke that we had. And then we had the oil spill, and there was that fire at the Port of Vancouver. So how do we deal with that? How do we take care of ourselves when our air quality and our water quality is compromised?
Naturopathic medicine is all about prevention. I teach nutrition. I always tell my students to breathe and also drink and eat with intention. I'm not sure if you've heard of Masaru Emoto's research. He's a water expert. He did research with water crystals and how thoughts and words affect water. So we are 75% water. So depending on our thoughts can affect the quality of the crystals that are formed inside of our beings. And there's a whole research behind it. So whenever you eat, whenever you drink, each breath you take, breathing with intention is very important. But also the physical aspect of things, doing a lung cleanse, using water purification systems. We can talk about all of those different aspects in my upcoming segments.
That's great. So what are some of the things that you're going to be focusing on in your segment?
I would love to interview different, expressive arts therapy is definitely an interest of mine. I have an extensive dance and writing background, of course. Interviewing expressive arts therapists and talking about how healing and health can arise from that. Just the creative aspect to life. Even Deepak Chopra said that creativity is the missing link in health.
Right.
So I also want to focus on those aspects, along with talking about all those environmental issues that affect not only you and me, but the whole planet.
Right.
Animals, creatures, all of us that thrive on everything that's kind of around us.
Right. So there's the physical, and then there's the metaphysical, right?
Yes.
The psychological.
Yes.
So what affects our bodies physically affects us psychologically as well.
Even what you eat affects you at a mental, emotional level. So having enough nutrition, our foods are so depleted.
Right.
So we need to make sure a good quality multivitamin is very essential in your diet. Many people say, oh, but I can get that through foods. Yes, we all know, eat your fruits and vegetables. That is fine. But I want to focus and go deeper into even the nutritional aspect of things. Yes, water intake, dehydration is very common symptom in a lot of the patients that I see, what I saw when I was practicing and even during clinic. But also the nutrition aspect of things. Why are foods getting depleted? So maybe even interviewing an expert in that aspect of things would be amazing.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of stress in our lives, right? So what about the balance of body and mind? What about things like meditation and things like that? They're therapeutic, right?
We can talk about definitely meditative techniques. Many people think meditation is sitting down and doing. It's a very it's a stereotypical image that we see. But meditation, there's walking meditation. There's eating meditation.
Yes.
Even right now, it's a meditative process. It's a creative process. I don't know what I'm going to say next as I'm talking to you. But this is meditation, just being open to the moment, being in the moment, not knowing what you're going to say, but just being open to receive and just letting it out and vocalizing it.
Right.
And yes, there is something as eating meditation, walking meditation. We can do one session on that, although I can talk 2 sessions on that particular topic, which is very exciting. But all those aspects of life and how to deal with all that stress.
Wow.
Which
Sherry, that
everyone goes
sounds
through.
wonderful. I'm really excited to have you on the show as a regular segment.
Thank you.
And we're really looking forward to your segments.
Appreciate that.
Is there a website where people can get for more information about the work you do and maybe about your blogging and the shows that you're going to be doing here on Actors
Absolutely. My website is www.sherryduggal.wix.com. Check it out. You can even Google me. I have lots of interviews in different topics, including writing and healing, which I definitely want to cover in one of the segments, because I also do writing and healing workshops. So you can check out my interviews, and now that I'm doing segments here, I can always post them on my website too, and you can always check them out there. And of course, also the Access website is also available for everyone to see.
Great. Wonderful. Really looking forward to your new segment. So
Wonderful.
tune in next time with Sherry Duggal and her new segment on health
Be
and
there
beauty.
or be square. Thank you so much.
And welcome back. This is Imtiaz Popat, and with me is Naveen Gurn. He is a board member of the Indian Summer Festival and curator of this amazing festival called Gunargie Being Brown in Chinatown, which opens next week at Center A. Naveen, tell us about this exhibition.
Well, thank you so much, Imtiaz, for the opportunity to talk about Gunargie Being Brown in Chinatown. And yeah, it's an exhibition that looks at the South Asian history of Chinatown. And this history goes back over a century. And we want to highlight in this exhibition is really the intercultural history of Chinatown. If you think about it, about 100 years ago, you know, Vancouver was a very young city.
Yes.
And it's trying to define what sort of idea did it want to be. And there was the premier and the prime minister talking about white man's country, white Canada forever. But in Chinatown, there was South Asian and First Nation and Chinese and Caucasian communities living together, building communities. So we want to pay homage to that history by doing this exhibition that sort of gives evidence to the history that's always there, but lost in the official archives.
Right, and it's a part of Vancouver history that we know very little about. So when you do an exhibition like that, it kind of brings that out. So tell us about the exhibition, what's going to be featured, and who are the artists?
That's a really great question, Imtiaz. We'll be having some archival photographs from that time period. And so Chinatown along Main and Hastings used to be this real imperial center of Vancouver. So the Carnegie Library was there, City Hall used to be represented as well too. So we have these photographs of South Asian Sikh men walking across the street in that area, just sort of claiming that space as their own. The Gunargie Party, which was this movement for Indian independence that was based across around the Pacific coast of North America, had its center in Chinatown on 516 Main Street, so right across the street from some of those buildings.
Yeah.
So again, it's claiming that space and showing those histories. We'll also be having an artist from Toronto named Jagdeep Arena, who's reimagining archival photographs, the lens of the past. And we have an artist coming up from Berkeley named Nisha Sembi, who's really involved in the graffiti culture and also the Gunargie Party culture of Berkeley. She'll be giving her artwork as well. And one of the coolest things, Imtiaz, is that we have this Chinese artist named Yul Ken Lam. And what he's done is reimagined this 1907 photograph of the Chinatown race riots. And it's not a black and white photograph, it's a black and blue photograph. It's a different coloring process. In any case, there's a South Asian man in the corner of that photograph. So he's taking old blue jeans, cutting them up, and stitching together that photograph out of blue jeans. So paying, credence to labor history, cultural history, all those sort of things. So that's what Gunj is going to be all about.
Right. So when does it run until?
It ends until August 15th, and so at the Century Art Gallery, as you mentioned, in Chinatown. And there'll be some public programming as well too. There'll be some spoken word events. There'll be a chance to hear the Gadar Party poetry, the Gunj, the echo of the past in that exhibition space. As well, we'll be teaming up with the Powell Street Festival in August for an event too.
Right. And there's two other exhibitions I want to talk about. There's one at the offsite space at the Vancouver Art Gallery, and that exhibition is about migration.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, that's done in conjunction with the Indian Summer Festival and the Vancouver Art Gallery offsite space by Reena Saini Kalat, and the place and the offsite spaces by the Shangri-La building. And it's a map of the world, but it's made out of barbed wire and strings, and it sort of speaks to this idea of migration, borders and barriers, but also of access. So it has this large image of the world map stitched together with string and barbed wire, but also embedded in the map are these little speakers. So you hear sounds of, air raid sirens or immigration people talking or barriers, all those sort of things. So it's all embedded into this space. And so that runs until September. And so it's a really great place. I encourage everyone to come and see it.
We have just time enough to talk about this mural at the Sherry Art Gallery. And that's been extended. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so that's called From Punjab with Love by Arijit Sen, who's a graphic designer from India. And this, as you mentioned, is at the Sherry Art Gallery. And it's this large 10-foot long mural that is a reduced version of a larger mural that's in Punjab.
Wow.
But it talks about the folk stories of Punjab, the living histories of Punjab, the rivers, the waterways. And as you mentioned, it's been extended by popular demand. So that's at the Sherry Art Gallery until the fall.
Right, I've seen it. It's quite amazing.
It really is. You can sort of,
this is a smaller version of a larger one.
Exactly, and you can sort of focus in on one particular element and just look at the detailing of clothes and trucks and wheat fields and all those sort of things. So it really is beautiful.
Naveen, thank you so much for coming by, and it's great. We've had an extended Indian summer. And congratulations for the work you've been doing at the festival.
Thank you so much, Imtiaz.
Thank you for joining us on Hot Topics. Today we're going to talk a little bit about Sean Atleo, who spoke at the Canadian-Australian Infrastructure Symposium. What do you think of that, Bill Wilson?
Not much.
Not much? You try not to think about it?
Well, I mean, he obviously got paid a huge amount of money to do that kind of stuff, and I mean, if people want to listen to him and pay him big money, that's fine with me, but I do remember him as the only national chief ever to resign in disgrace, and that sadly depreciates a great deal of what he says.
That's true.
There are a lot of Indians out there that are selling their reputation for cash, and I wish I was one of them.
Wow. Well, he spent so many years building relationships only to basically many think.
Well, I don't know that he spent many years. I mean, I've been involved in the Indian business for over 50 years. Sean, to my memory, was involved maybe 7 or 8 years. But he's a well-educated, well-spoken guy.
Well-dressed.
I think it's just sad that he got in bed with Stephen Harper's government and then had to resign because of educational deals that were made behind the scene. That bothers me because it depreciates all of our reputations and almost brought the AFN to its knees.
Yeah, to its knees, eh? Well, the other thing is I managed to speak with the CEO on Co-op Radio. His name is Mark Romoff, and you can listen to that at www.coopradio. When Spirit Whispers is the name of the show, between 1 o'clock and 2:30, to hear that interview and to hear the speech that Sean Atleo delivered on that day at the symposium.
Well, I don't imagine I'm going to stay up to do that.
No? Okay. Well, that's all right. But other things are going on in our town that have been really important at a community level, right?
Yeah, we last weekend we went to the East Van Summer Slam, and we did a number of interviews. One of them was, can you start?
That's right. Kenny Starr is not only a singer. This young lady is just doing so much with her life. She's just a young lady. She's responsible for the video. You can hear her singing a song called "Save Our Waters," and that is produced.
Seen that, yeah.
Have you? Do you like it? Mm-hmm. It's produced by Hyder Raid, and I thought it was an awesome video. They also did a video called "A Message to Stephen Harper," which is about the pipelines.
I haven't seen that.
You know what else she's doing, Bill? She's actually working on her own documentary. And this documentary is called Play Your Gender. And it's about the music gap. It's about the gender gap in the music industry.
Gender gap and everything. I mean, the reality is that Aboriginal women in particular are excluded from most of the things that go on. I mean, it's only recently, that you've even had Aboriginal chiefs.
That's right.
And my wife Bev Sellers was a chief, and she left in favor of another younger woman who had more energy, according to my wife, to take over, so Bev could write her book. But I mean, women have traditionally been excluded. In fact, the relationship between men and women was described by the Indian people as being foolish. My mother told me, and she was in front of a CBC audience nationally, the lady asked her, "Aren't you in favor of equality?" And my mother said, "Why would I take a step down? I've never been equal in my life. I've always been superior," she says.
I like the way she thinks.
And when my son can bear children, he can be an equal. That's what she said to this. Well, that's how I was born. That's how I was brought up by her. I've never understood the discrimination among the sexes. I never understood that.
No, I never have either. You know who else we met at the East Van Summer Jam is a fellow by the name of Aaron Ross, who's also with a band called the Boom Booms, and he also works with the Music Tree, and played a hand in coordinating this year's East Van Summer Jam. And then he introduced us to a fellow his name is Silas, and he has like a hip hop band, and he has a foundation called Bavaruka. Yeah.
Never heard of it.
Yeah, it's a youth foundation. They like to build partnerships with Indigenous people, or looking to build partnerships with Indigenous people, and to create more youth-orientated events.
As long as it's not hip hop or rap, I don't mind.
But it is, though. Oops, I forgot to say that part. But I just love the fact that he's giving and recognizes that the youth need a voice.
Well, as long as the Aboriginal people are starting to be heard, I mean, that's the key thing. Whether they're musicians or singers or authors or other people like that, the reality is that there's a huge amount of talent in our community, that is simply ignored and unexplored. The best soccer players in the world are Indian people, and yet there's only been one in the National Soccer League. Terry Felix was on for the Whitecaps one time, but I knew, and I played against 20 or 30 kids that were just as good as Terry was, but they didn't recognize it. It's the same in hockey.
Sure.
It's the same in any other kind of sport. Aboriginal people are discriminated against, and they don't get the opportunity to go that way, And like Bev's son, Scott, he could have been in the MHL, but he simply couldn't stand the discrimination that was implicit in minor hockey.
True, eh? Another subject was basically the Cottonwood Gardens that runs parallel with Strathcona Gardens was almost threatened by being destroyed by, they want to put a causeway through there. And we did an interview with a lady by the name of Adeline Canavera.
That's right.
So,
Cavanagh.
Pardon me, it was Cavanagh. And we did an interview with her, and she discussed what kind of things that are grown and done in the Cottonwood Gardens, just on the outside of Strathcona Garden in downtown Eastside.
True. They have, the Cottonwood Garden has an Indigenous medicine there, herbal garden, and other youth, again, are basically, creating their own little sanctuary there, and are quite concerned. There's actually a petition that we can put out for you a little later on in the show, so you can sign that petition and do what you can to prevent the development and
Yeah, of this
So,
beautiful garden.
Yeah, that's
downtown
true.
Eastside.
I had my first tomato out of my garden today.
Did you?
Yeah, my garden's on the 20th floor balcony at my place.
Nice.
That was delicious.
Tomatoes grow fast too.
Well, not as fast as I want them, but I mean, nevertheless. I mean, what I don't understand is why everybody does not have a garden. I mean, it's so easy to grow, and it's so fulfilling, you know, and it's healthy.
That's true. It's the most organic way to go. Another thing, just before we go, is the Northwest Indigenous Council. There's a new organization being headed by Ernie Cray. I believe Scott Clark is a part of that. It's an extension of ALIVE and meant to fill the void of the United Native Nations. What do you think of that?
I think it's a good idea. The urban Aboriginal people need to be represented at a national level. You know, some of the players I think might be a little bit suspect, but that's not for me to decide. The reality is that urban Indians need a voice, and we have not had a voice, you know, since the United Native Nations was run into the ground. And whether it's that group or another group, the reality is that I would even join it. And I was the president of the United Native Nations, the founding president of the United Native Nations, so I know the importance of that kind of stuff. In fact, that's how I got to the national table in 1983, talking to the Prime Minister about Aboriginal title and treaty rights.
And that's how we move forward.
Well, we did, but you know, it seems that we take 2 steps forward and 1 step backward, and we continually destroy ourselves. But the reality is these organizations need to speak on behalf of people, just as DIA elected chiefs need to speak on behalf of people, not mimicking non-Indian assumptions about who or what we should be. I mean, if this organization is going to do that, then I would certainly join, I would certainly contribute. I have no political ambitions in that regard, but you know, our urban voice needs to be said.
Well, you could make the difference. Thank you so much for joining us today again on Hot Topics, Gary.
Yeah.
Always my pleasure.
Bill?
Hemas, Hereditary Chief Bill Wilson.
Ready? To help us understand how SRO renters are tackling the problems of rent evictions, I'm joined in the studio today by 2 SRO tenants, Mohammed Valayati and Kevin Buzan, and both of them are my colleagues, and we're organizing a new group called the SRO Collaborative. Welcome to the studio, guys.
Thank you.
So,
you.
Mohammed,
Good
we'll
to be
start
here.
with you. Tell us about what the SRO Collaborative is.
SRO Collaborative is an initiative started early this year, and it's about educating people about their rights as a tenant. And in occasion, we have to teach them like how to fight the landlord, or how to fight the wrong eviction notice, or stop the rent eviction in general.
So our logo for the SRO Collaborative, tell us about the logo.
Okay, well, we had many ideas, like umbrella and like many others, AK-47. But we decided the hammer will be better symbolic as a repair, and the other one as like we will obtain a court order to do that. That's through the legal battle we're gonna win this, not through the force.
Right. So, yeah, the SRO Collaborative, we're trying to improve the habitability of these terrible SROs. Can you tell us about some of the places that we're in right now?
Yes, well, the live project is a region. Actually, I've been involved in that too. I've taken lots of photographs in the past few months. And week after week after week, I've never seen any improvement in the condition of the washrooms and the showers in the building. And then me and you, we were a few times, we saw the needles, everything in an unprotected box on the floor. So I think we should take some legal action to stop these, and then make the landlord comply with the act, and which, you know, you have to provide the appropriate washroom and a shower and a sanitized facility for the client.
So Kevin, you lived at the Regent Hotel. You live there now, and you also lived across the street at the Balmoral, owned by the same owner.
For 3 years.
Yeah, what was the conditions like when you were at the Balmoral?
The conditions were horrible. Rat infestation, bed bugs, roaches, and it seemed that the problem wasn't getting fixed or addressed appropriately, and the needs of myself and other tenants in the building weren't being met and still aren't being met, as they should be in a city such as Vancouver.
And what happened at the Balmoral? You had a problem with your ceiling.
Yeah, one day it collapsed, and the ceiling collapsed on one corner of the building, and you could just imagine all the leakage, sewage. It was a mess. It was gross. I took pictures. I tried to get it dealt with, with writing up a letter, and it took over a month and a half for them to even, patch it up. I ended up, having to, clean it up myself, but.
And did you end up on the street as a result of that? Did you end up homeless?
Yeah, homeless.
Yeah.
It's not my first time that I've experienced, the streets, but, for me, the streets, are a lot better than the SRO. It's only just because, I've accumulated some things that, I need an SRO right now. But, if it was just me and the backpack and the clothes in my backpack, and that was it, I'd rather be on the street.
Yeah. So, Mohammed, how are we going to slow the rate of homelessness and improve the SROs? In a nutshell, what are we going to be doing in the next little while?
Actually, in some initiative, I think we try to convince the government to start buying these SROs and improve them, and then put them back in the service at the affordable rate. In the short terms, we are just picking up on the landlords to fixing up the problematic buildings, and then just bring them to the code.
And Kevin, we're going to start getting the word out to other SRO tenants like yourself, right? In the Regent and other buildings in the downtown east side.
Yeah.
And we've been talking about doing this SRO school.
Yeah.
What's that about?
Oh, those are the workshops that are being set up to educate, everybody in the downtown east side that wants to be involved. There's workshops about leadership, communication, things like, how to, properly, do up a letter and, get the courts involved and get, do it the right way.
Get
and
compensation
from
your landlord.
Yeah, and all those little things, we're gonna learn a lot of great things and empower ourselves to be able to, make positive changes, be the ones that, put the work in and roll up our sleeves and, just get down to business. So that way we can clean up the downtown east side, right? And make it better,
And so this is really important that SRO tenants are getting organized, and there's lots of volunteers that are helping too. We have university students and professors and others doing research for us about the SROs, and we're going to try to change the policy, but we're also working on the ground to make improvements in the hotels so people don't end up homeless, and we fight for new housing. So how do people get involved? Like, what can they do if they want to get involved?
Oh, it's very easy. They can attend our meetings, and then we have office hours, and if they have encountered any problem or they know anybody who's a tenant and have a problem, they contact you or me or one of the collaborative, and then well, even though it's a Downtown East Side initiative, but it doesn't exclude the Downtown East Side. We should be able to help everybody.
Okay, and we meet every Saturday at noon, except for the month of August, right next to the Ovaltine Cafe, and we'll put it on the screen, 253 East Hastings. And if people want to come to the meeting, we have a great lunch, and we're going to organize a union, right? Basically a union of tenants across the Downtown East Side and beyond. Thanks for being here, you two.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
shiny bald head.
Sunny bald head.
My shiny.
It's out of running water.
No, thank you. That's a true shot. Look at this, is amazing. Malaki?
Yeah.
Malaki?
Thank you. Panic for $1, only $1. Panic, $1.
I'm from up north. I'm 1,000 miles from home. So if I got phased out of this place, I'm literally going to be living out of one of the shelters.
This is the systematic evacuation of low-income people from our neighborhood. It's happening now, and we're tired of it, and it needs to stop.
Let's go! Let's get on the street!
And we need to let them know we have strength in numbers, we are a strong community, and we will not take this shit.
Humility and respect, the City of Vancouver formally apologizes for its complicity, its inaction, and for failing to protect her residents of Japanese descent. And be it further resolved that the City of Vancouver pledges to do all it can to ensure that such injustices will not happen again to any of its residents, thereby upholding the principles of human rights, justice, and equality now and in the future.
Hello, I'm here with Jean Swanson, who is a tireless advocate for housing and representing marginalized people here in our community. For 3 decades, you've been educating us and fighting for housing rights. Now you've been paying attention in the municipal level for a lot of that time. We've just come out of our housing count in Vancouver, and where does that put us? Are we winning or losing with our homeless count?
We're definitely losing, and I'm really, really worried that next year the homeless count is going to go up hundreds of people. It was 57 lower this year than it was last year, but the problem is that there's no new social housing coming on stream. Welfare rates are frozen, and we're losing 300 SROs, which are the last stop before homelessness. We lost 300 last year, and the city's afraid we're going to lose 300 next year. So it looks really grim. There's also a building called the Quality Inn, which has 157 rooms that the city leased, and the city's lease is up next year. So next year we're hardly getting any new social, there's no new buildings opening that are just for homeless people, and we're going to be losing the Quality Inn, and we could be losing 300 SRO rooms.
And these SRO rooms are places that were built to just sort of bring people to the city for their weekends and their time off, and then they're kind of like one room with a bathroom. There are a lot of them in the downtown east side, and they're being renovated. Let's talk about the conditions of SROs. They are purposefully left almost to deteriorate so that landlords are forced to evict and renovate. What is the strategy there for a landowner? Why would they do that?
Well, some landlords do that, not all of them, but for example, the owner at the Clifton Hotel let it deteriorate till it was absolutely disgusting, and then he evicted everybody, and now he wants to renovate it. And I've heard rumors that he wants to rent it out at $800 or $900 a month to international students.
Right. So,
but a lot of people don't let the buildings run. I mean, the buildings are in bad shape, but the other problem is people who buy the building, get rid of the tenants, upgrade a little bit, and then raise the rent $200 or $300 or $400 a month.
So what are our municipal leaders discussing right now? What is this proposed SRO bylaw? Can you explain it?
So the city is worried about the 300 SRO units a year that they're losing, and so they've come up with this plan. There's three or four parts to it. One is that if you are a landlord and you're going to repair or renovate a place and the tenant has to leave because of this, then you have to get a permit. And if you have to get a permit, then the city can negotiate with you about a tenant relocation plan and other things, such as keeping the rent down in the new units. So that's one thing. It might work in a situation like the Clifton, but it probably won't work. I don't think it'll work in situations like there's this guy named Stephen Lippman who's about 8 or 9 buildings, and he gets rid of the people first and then he renovates, so I don't think it would work with him. So there's that. Then they have another plan to work with Van City and maybe give grants of $20,000 or $30,000 per unit to private and nonprofit hotel room owners to upgrade, because the conditions in the rooms are pretty bad. Single room, bathroom down the hall, mice, roaches, things like that. So the problem with that one, with the Van City one, is unless it includes really strong rent control, so that the existing low-income tenants who are on welfare or disability or seniors, they can only afford $375 a month. So unless the rents are kept down that low and there's a signed in stone agreement to that effect, those units will be lost to low-income people.
And that changes the face of our downtown east side drastically, and it changes our community. So
there's one other thing they're planning to do. It used to be that if you took your SRO unit out of the SRO bylaw, that is, if you converted to, say, being a regular hotel or a backpackers or something, you'd have to pay, or the council may ask you to pay up to $15,000. So the bylaw amendment that they're proposing is that they're going to raise that fee to $125,000, which is a lot. It's a good move. It's not quite good enough in San Francisco. It's $200,000, but it probably won't stop many people from being rent-evicted from the hotels, because the owners aren't really taking them out of the SRO bylaw.
Right. So this is all still in discussion at City Hall. And how will it be enforced, I wonder, when if there is this such?
So there's a public hearing on the 22nd, and a lot of us are going up there to try and make the council understand how bad the situation is, that if we don't have any new social housing coming on stream for homeless people, or virtually none, we're losing 300 SROs, and their mechanisms aren't going to save very many. Plus, we're losing the Quality Inn. Next year, we could have hundreds more homeless people. So we're trying to get people up to City Council to try and get some action on that. And it's the 22nd. Yeah, we don't know what time yet, but we probably will on the Friday before then.
So you're trying to quell this next wave of displacement that seems to be happening, and the city looks to San Francisco and New York and other cities that have gone through this. And what can we learn from those cities here in Vancouver so we don't make flawed decisions?
Well, San Francisco is kind of a leader. They have the $200,000 for converting out of the SRO status. And they have I think they have a tenant relocation plan too, which would be good. But now in Vancouver, we have a 0.5% vacancy rate. So saying you're going to relocate somebody is virtually useless because there's no place to go.
And the average rent in Vancouver is hovering around $1,100 for a 1-bedroom.
Right.
And the price of a welfare check is $610.
A person on welfare gets $610 for food, rent, and everything. So, but the other huge issue is we desperately need a federal, provincial, national housing program, because what's really causing the problem is there are no new social housing buildings for low-income people being built. The last one is opening this month, and it was announced in 2007, so that's been 8 years. So if we were going to have one in 8 years, we'd need an announcement now. There is no announcement. And that's key. So people need to remember that for the federal election. We need a party that's going to be pushing for a federal provincial social housing program that builds thousands of units of new housing.
Right. Time for a collaborative and intelligent approach.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jean Swanson, for joining us on Access TV.
Welcome.
All right.
Hi, I'm Nargis Molai for Access Television, and we're here today with Z Kessler. She's an artist, an educator, and a community organizer. Besides her involvement in community outreach for Vancouver Maker Fair, Z is also a founder of Maker Mobile, which is a workshop on wheels. It's a mobile hack space for kids. She inspires and engages young makers, basically. Z believes that inspiring spaces create inspiring citizens, and she creates projects, installations, and spaces as means to engage playful and educational interactions. We're happy to have you here, Z.
Thanks.
Thank you. So your latest project, which is the Tiny Community Center, was just awarded artist residency for the Artist and Community Program from Vancouver Park Boards. Congratulations.
Thanks. It's really exciting.
It is exciting. Could you please tell us a little bit more about this Tiny Community Center?
Sure. So it's basically a tiny house, and it measures 8.5 feet wide by 20 feet long by 13.5 feet in height. And it's built from recycled materials, and it sort of operates as a residency, an artist residency in a classroom. And it was funded by a series of workshops we ran last summer for basically learn how to build for people that haven't built a house or any construction projects before. So there was nothing sort of like in that middle range of like, how do you learn to build but not sign up for a carpentry program?
Right. Did you build it yourself?
No, definitely not. We had a team of about 5 or 6 people that are tradespeople, so they know exactly what they're doing, and I sort of took on more of the organizational role in marketing, and I wanted to learn too, which is why I organized it.
That's great. And how many people does it fit in this tiny home?
Well, you could fit a lot if you stood up, but as a classroom, it could fit about 12 students and 2 teachers.
Great. Where did the idea come from?
Well, it sort of started when I was in art school, and I didn't really feel like I belonged in any particular category of art. You know, you have your drawing, painting, sculpting, and I was sort of in this weird space of not really knowing, you know, how to get involved in the art community. I was told to go to art galleries and meet owners, and I was just like, that's not really the atmosphere. Like, I didn't really find it very welcoming. So I got involved doing community projects when I took this class called Site and Intervention, which is basically a class where you kind of do public interventions with people and sort of cause a spectacle on purpose. So that was really exciting to me. And then I've also been interested in teaching kids since I was young, so I just started teaching what I know from art school, and then it kind of evolved from there. And it sort of became that, the tiny house sort of became that spectacle where I realized like people are interested in this topic for more reasons than one, and so it would be neat to house a space for learning inside.
So the tiny home is completed now?
Yeah.
What do you have planned for to use this space for?
So starting late this summer, we're starting our artist residency with the Park Board, as you said, and it's called the Magic Trout Imaginarium, and it'll be, of course, at Trout Lake, and just located in behind the community center, and we'll be hosting different workshops based on like different creative exercises using the neighborhood and the ecology of the lake as inspiration for the projects we create. And we have 3 artists working with us, myself, then there's Emily Smith, who is a fiber artist and textile artist, and Françoise Thibault, who creates these really interesting drawing contraptions out of plexiglass, teaching people to perceive their environment differently through a drawing device she created.
Interesting. And these are just for kids, or adults can also?
It's all ages.
Yeah.
It's all ages. I mean, kids definitely are attracted to those sorts of things, but adults often think to themselves, I'm not an artist, I can't draw. But these are created for people who don't see themselves as artists.
Sure. And I hear that you hold workshops on building a tiny home, which I'd be interested in taking.
Yeah, so last summer we hosted a whole entire series that was basically from the beginning to the end how to build the house. But now we're sort of just offering the intro workshop just for people who are interested to know like local regulations and codes and insurance procedures. And we've been through a lot. It's sort of a new thing, so sharing that information is important for people who are interested.
I'm sure you asked a lot how you built it and
oh yeah, I get a lot of emails from people, hey, can we meet up for coffee? And I just I don't drink coffee, I don't have enough time for coffee, so I'm like, let's all just get together and brainstorm and talk about it together, because there's a lot of people and we can all help each other. Maybe someone has carpentry skills and maybe someone else wants to build a house but doesn't have experience. We can all get together as a community.
Sure. And like you mentioned, you built this tiny house with recycled material from movie sets, and you had a bunch of people helping you, right? So you didn't really have a big budget, which is just amazing.
Yeah, one of our carpenters is a movie set carpenter, so he would collect stuff that would get thrown away, and we would use it. Stuff from product testing places. We could get some insulation. We've gotten a whole bunch of things donated and free. So.
Sure. What's new and exciting? What's coming up? In the tiny home world.
Yeah, in tiny house world, well, our residency starts soon, which is exciting, probably the end of the summer. We're sort of waiting for a move-in date. But then as well, we just kind of heard that the North Vancouver city of North Vancouver is interested in building a tiny house village, or at least experimenting with the idea. So I'm excited to see where that goes and if it kind of comes to fruition.
Sure. I mean, I've been following along with what you've been up to, and I do consider you the heart and soul behind this tiny house movement in the city, and it's very cool to see it all come together.
Yeah.
One last question I have for you: how important do you find spaces in bringing out that creative side of us, whether it's as adults or kids, and how does that play in?
Yeah, I mean, architecture speaks about that a lot in urban design. I think Vancouver's pretty good at that, but if you create an inspiring space where people want to be, it causes certain interactions to happen between people, and using the tiny house as a space for interactions to happen, I think it's just kind of unusual. And so when people see something like a tiny house, they're like, hey, and they stop and they talk to someone who they might not normally talk to, who might also be stopped kind of staring at it, the spectacle. And it starts conversations, and even the space inside is sort of like, as you said, like an inspiring space that you can, come up with new ideas and a new way to look at your environment around you and what you can do in your own spaces at home.
Absolutely. And how do you get the community involved in how to use this tiny space?
Well, we'd like to kind of put it out there to other people, because after we're done our residency, we're interested in knowing what people would like to use it for and what would be interesting to see inside. So if you'd like to tweet us, our Twitter handle is @TCC_van. And just let us know what you think could be good for it, because we're thinking about outdoor school, we're thinking about different community organizations using it for meetings and different things. So just putting it out there to people.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Zee.
Thanks.
It's great to have you. Thank you very much for watching.
And that's the show, Molly.
Imtiaz, up next on our next episode, we wanted to talk about transit and politics. And I know that you wrote an article in the Georgia Straight about the no vote in the plebiscite.
Well, people voted no, but it's a time to have a people's plan, which is what Adrienne Carr is talking about, to do a people's plan for the transit.
Still something we need to work out. As well, there is an election in October, and all of the candidates that are running in many of these contentious ridings will be out and about at festivals. I know the Pride Parade, there will be appearances by politicians, and we want to hear the questions you would put to those politicians, and we will put them directly to them next episode of Access TV. So get in touch and send us your top 5 questions.
Until then, this is Imtiaz Popat
and Molly Caron.
Thank you.